I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. We continue in the Gospels. Christ is still centering his ministry in the Galilean area because the people in Jerusalem want to kill him. We've been reading a lot of his discourses, miracles. Recently we read the healing of the daughter of the Canaanite woman, the feeding of the 4,000, and in our last video we read about his metaphor, parable, or discourse, whatever you want to call it, of the leaven of the Pharisees as they spread false doctrine. Now we are going to read in both Mark and Luke, but these are going to be completely unrelated stories. And this is because these two stories, or these two portions of the record, are very, very short. I think 4 verses each, maybe 5. Very short. And so doing one by itself would be a maybe 3-minute video. So I'm going to put them together here. But they are unrelated, and I'm putting in this little portion of Luke because as I've gone through this, I've realized that Luke has taken the discourses of Christ and broken them up and scattered portions of them throughout his record, rather than just having one sermon at a time. And so when I read the Sermon on the Mount, I read a chapter in Luke that had the Beatitudes and a few other portions of the Sermon on the Mount, but it didn't have all the Sermon on the Mount. The rest of the Sermon on the Mount is scattered out in pieces throughout the rest of the Gospel of Luke, and we'll be reading a lot of it later on in this month. But that's how Luke seems to have put the discourses and the teachings of Christ into his record. And this portion of Luke, these few verses, actually relate back somewhat both to the Sermon on the Mount, but also to what we just read in Matthew and Mark. And so I'm going to put them here. Then we are going to read a story that is unique to Mark. It is in no other gospel. It's one of my favorite stories. And so we're going to put it here with this, because they're both very, as I said, they're both very short, and so we should be able to get them both in a fairly brief video. In this video, we have a Joseph Smith translation. Now, what the Joseph Smith translation is, this is a translation or correction done by Joseph Smith to restore those passages that have been lost or corrupted over the years. So first, let us look at Luke. Luke chapter 12, verses 54 to 59. And he said also to the people, when you see a cloud rise out of the west, straightway ye say, there cometh a shower, and so it is. And when ye see the south wind blow, ye say, there will be heat, and it cometh to pass. Ye hypocrites, ye can discern the face of the sky and of the earth, but how is it that ye do not discern this time? Yea, and why even of yourselves judge ye not what is right? When thou goest with thine adversary to the magistrate, as thou art in the way, give diligence that thou mayest be delivered from him, lest he hale thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and the officer cast thee into prison. I tell thee, thou shalt not depart thence, till thou hast paid the very last mite. This is in 2 parts. So first of all, he has, when you see a cloud, you predict rain. When you feel the wind, you predict heat. You understand the weather, but you don't understand the signs of the time. This is just like what we read in Matthew. When Matthew talked about when you see the red sky at night or the red sky in the morning, you can read those signs, but you can't read the signs of the times. That's why I placed this one here, because it comes right after Matthew. It's kind of tied in with Matthew there. Not much else to say about that. The second part takes us back to the Sermon on the Mount, where he says, you shall not come out until you have paid the other last farthing. That is recorded, I believe, either in Matthew 6 or Matthew, I think it's in Matthew 7, but I'm not sure which one. And I, right now, can't remember what I said about it back then, but this is, if you think about the old concept of a debtor's prison, you go into debt, you can't pay the debt, and so your creditor takes you before the judge. The judge judges you guilty, he turns you over to the officer who casts you into prison. There's no way to make money in prison, so the only way to get out of debtor's prison is for somebody else to come and pay your debt. And that's what Christ is talking about here. He's talking about a debtor's prison. Be careful that you're not cast into debtor's prison, because you cannot come out on your own. Now, let us look at the Joseph Smith translation here. So in 54, it is instead, it now says, he said also unto the people, ye say straightway, instead of straightway ye say. Just minor corrections there. In verse 55, instead of, and when ye see the south wind blow, it's, and when the south wind blows. Again, minor. In verse 56, instead of ye hypocrites, it's O hypocrites. And at the end there, it is that ye, how is it that ye do not discern this time, is changed to you do not discern this time. Now in verse 58, this is a little interesting, so let's just read this in the Joseph Smith translation. Why goest thou to thine adversary for a magistrate, when thou art in the way with thine enemy? Why not give diligence, that thou mayest be delivered from him? Now that is interesting. Why goest thou to thine adversary for a magistrate? Why, in other words, why are you seeking your enemies to be a mediator between you and your adversary? So why are you going to Rome to settle your disputes? You should be doing that among yourselves, so that you don't have to deal with that. You're not thrown into the Roman prisons. It's kind of the same thing today here, that we go to our church leaders to settle disputes. So if we have a problem within our ward, we should take it up with our bishop. Go to the stake president if we need to. But we shouldn't be suing each other at law. We shouldn't be going to the civil court to settle disputes among church members. I know this is getting a little long already. I've said a little too much, but I'm going to turn to Mark and we'll see where we go. Because I love this story in Mark and I just really want to read it right now. Mark 8, verses 22 through 26. And he cometh to Bethsaida, and they bring a blind man unto him, and besought him to touch him. And he took the blind man by the hand, and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes, and put his hands upon him, he asked him if he saw aught. And he looked up and said, I see men as trees walking. After that he put his hands again upon his eyes, and made him look up, and he was restored, and saw every man clearly. And he sent him away to his house, saying, Neither go into the town, nor tell it to any in the town. I like this story because this is the two-part healing. He spits in his eyes and places his hands on him. In a sense, he's anointing his eyes. But when he blesses him, and then he asks the man, are you able to see now? And the man says, well, everything's a bit blurry. He says, I see men as trees, meaning I can't distinguish features. They're just blocks of wood walking around. And so Christ blesses him again, and he has full healing. And I love this because this shows us that faith is not always instantaneous. We may have the faith not to be healed immediately, but that our pain may be eased, things will be made a little easier for us, and eventually we will reach healing. Like this man that Christ blessed him, and he only got part of his sight back. And it took a second blessing to fully heal him, because his faith wasn't quite strong enough. He didn't know, he had some doubt, and so he only got a partial healing. But once he had that once he saw the improvement, he was able to get the rest of it. And it's kind of like, with the modern day when people complain about paying tithing. But if you pay it, like I thought this story, a friend of mine once told me the story that when he first joined the church, he didn't want to pay tithing. And so he made the deal with God. So, okay, God, I'm going to go pay all my bills, everything that needs to be paid. And when that's done, then I'll pay what's left to you. I'll give tithing of what's left. And he said he did that. And at the end of the year, it turned out that he had paid 10%. He said, okay, God, I get it. And he started paying tithing first. And at the end of the next year, even though his income didn't increase, he paid his 10% and then paid all of his bills, and now he had a little left over. And he said he couldn't account for it. There was nothing funny about the accounting. But this, again, he saw a progressive miracle. He was willing to believe a little, and he was given a little blessing. And that little blessing gave him the faith to believe more, and he got the full blessing. And that's what this teaches us, this story in Mark. And remember, this is unique to Mark. This is only in Mark, and it is one of my favorite miracles of Christ. But I'm going to leave that here, and I believe we have a few more combined videos and multiple Gospels coming up, so I will see you there.